Hello, my name is Kate Rademacher, and we're here with Writing for Your Life. During this interview, we spoke with author Mark Schaefer about his newest book, Audacious. Before we begin the interview, we want to just provide a correction. During the interview, there was an error in the way the title of Mark's book was read. Mark's newest book, the title is Audacious: How Humans Win in an AI Marketing World. Again, Audacious: How Humans Win in an AI Marketing World. So that's a correction to what was recorded in the original interview, but we hope you will enjoy the conversation. And here it is. Thanks. Greetings. My name is Kate Rademacher, and we are here with Mark Schaefer. Mark is a return guest, and I'm so excited to talk with him again. Mark is a globally recognized keynote speaker, blogger, consultant, and author. He's the author of a new book, Audacious: The Rebel's Guide to Disruptive Marketing, which is just such a compelling and exciting title. It grabs you right from the beginning. And before we start, dive into hearing about your book, Mark, I just want to say, for those who are watching or listening, that you've been such an incredible friend to Writing for Your Life. And Brian Elaine, who was the founder of this platform, when I sort of took over leadership, he said to me multiple times, Mark Schaefer is the guy I listen to. He's the one. He's the one
Wow.
who just, I like read him,
No
very
pressure, Kate.
So I have too have come to that. I read I read your newsletter and your blog, and so I get so much wisdom from you. And you're so grateful with generous with your wisdom and your experience. So I'm thankful for that. So let's start. If you can just tell us about the book Audacious, and maybe talk a little bit about this word disruptive. What do you mean by being disruptive, and how might that relate to, particularly to writers who are putting their content out in the world? Especially in the context of AI, as we were just talking about before we started recording. Thank
Well,
you.
when I write a book, I don't have a plan to write books, even though I've been pretty consistent doing that. I only write a book when I see a problem in the world. I hear the same thing everywhere. And certainly the thing that people are struggling with today is, what is happening with AI? Where are we going to fit? And I hope all of your listeners are experimenting every day, pushing the edges of ChatGPT just to see what it can do. And it's quite magical. And what I realized is that this is the first time, really, in history there's been this technological revolution, and we can't take a class to be better. We can't be smarter than AI. We can't outsmart it, so we have to find a way to outhuman it. This is really, it's a little scary. It's a little scary for me, because the message in the book is, if you're just working at a level that's competent, I mean, that usually gets us through this world, right? But today, if you're competent, that's ignorable. And AI is competent. It's more than competent and getting better all the time. And so this book is it's filled with hundreds of ideas, case studies. I got to talk to the greatest creative geniuses in the world, and they shared their ideas about, where do we fit? How do we ignite the human fireworks that are uniquely ours? And I think, and then the response to the book has been great. People have been very excited about it. And so that's been rewarding to me.
Well, that's so exciting, and congratulations. Can you just talk a little bit before we talk about some of the strategies and ideas that you're advocating for in this book? Can you just talk a little bit about what you see as ineffective, particularly about those who are trying to market or promote their creative work or other work?
Well, so as I looked at some of the messages, some of the content ideas and marketing that was really breaking through today, and dissected it and talked to the people who were behind it, I learned that there were really three main strategies. So if you think about, you're trying to show up in the world, you tell a story. So what is a story? A story is what is the narrative? A story is where is the narrative? Where is it being told? And then the third piece is who's telling it. So if you disrupt one of those pieces, you have a chance of standing out because you're doing something that people haven't seen before. And let me give you a kind of a crazy little example. And that is the cover of my book is disruptive. So, I mean, you might be thinking, how is that even possible? A book is a book is a book. Well, we had this idea that um, my entire book cover is a QR code. And when you take your smartphone and you hover over the cover of my book and click on this QR code, the book cover changes. It's called the infinity cover. So what we did is we uploaded the book into AI and we uploaded some examples of art into AI so that it got the right tone and color palette. And then so the cover changes and it shows abstract art based on the stories in the book. And it's very entertaining. But think about it. I'm disrupting the story. It's never been told like that before. I'm disrupting where the story is told. I'm even disrupting who's telling the story. The book cover is telling the story. There's nobody else involved. And so this is something that makes it conversational, or at least I hope. And I mean, and I can see how many people are clicking the cover. People love it.
That's awesome. Well, I love it. I mean, such a good example of you walking the walk as well as talking the talk, and that's part of what I love about your work is that you sort of you live your message in so many ways out in what you're doing. Well, tell me about awe. So one of your chapters is called All About Awe, and I really liked. I love that you focused on the concept of awe, and in particular, you have a phrase collective effervescence.
Yes.
Um, so maybe you can just tell us what you mean by awe and how this fits into being, disruptive or sort of creating new ways of who and how you spread your message. Thanks.
Well, I'm really glad you brought this up because I think it's one of the big ideas in the book and something that's really been overlooked. Years ago, I saw this research that was done by a friend of mine, very good researcher, and he looked at billions of pieces of content on the internet, and he wanted to know what word is most associated with content that spreads and goes viral. And that word was awe. I thought that was interesting. It's not really a surprise, but I couldn't figure out, all right, how do we incorporate that into our work every day? How do we incorporate that into, a blog post or a podcast? And so I never forgot about it, but I couldn't really figure out how to internalize it. Well, a few years ago, this social psychologist wrote a book called Awe. He said this is the last human emotion to be studied. People have written books about fear and hate and love and everything else, but no one has studied awe. And to no one's surprise, he said, well, awe comes from things that are vast and unexpected. But there's a part in the book that sort of explained a lot to me. He talks about this idea of everyday awe. Now, here's like a simple example of how this works. So when I was a young guy, you would have to save your money to buy a record album. I know most of your listeners have no idea what I'm talking about, but you save your money to buy a record album. And once you got that record album, all your friends came to your house. And then you listened to the record over and over again, and you sang along with the lyrics that are on the album cover, and you read the liner notes, and you kind of make a little party out of it. Usually, pizza was involved. Now, think about our world today. Most most people today, especially young people today, consume their whole world by themselves through their earbuds. They listen to all their music, they watch all their movies, they watch their TV shows, their podcasts, everything. They have their own world of it's isolated. And what's missing in our world today is shared experiences. Now, think about listening to your favorite song by yourself in your room through your earbuds. Compare that to having a gathering of people where you're singing and dancing. What's the difference? That's collective effervescence. Collective effervescence is what you experience, even if it's the same music, when you bring people together in a special way, and that creates awe. It's an emotional contagion when you bring people together. Now, think about the opportunity we have. We live in a world that's lonely and isolated and depressed. We see this in the news all the time. What can we do in our communities? What can we do in our businesses? What can we do in our groups to bring people together in a meaningful way that creates that collective effervescence? That's something only humans can do. AI can't touch that. It's something, distinctive that we own.
Wow, I love that. What a great explanation. Thank you. I have a 19-year-old daughter, and so what you're saying about the isolation of her media experience compared to the sort of group experience you described, and just for millennia how humans have come together to dance and celebrate, and now we're in such a different space. So that's really, really salient. Thank you. Well, as you were talking, I know you talk a lot about word of mouth marketing, WOM, word of mouth. And in my own graduate work, in a marketing class I took, my main takeaway was word of mouth. Word of mouth is where it's all at. And you talk a lot about that, or some about that. Can you just talk about the role of, um, influencers is such a fraught word, these days. It's sort of the role of influencers, but you kind of break it down into various groups, including um, people who are influencers, but also advocates. So, can you just talk a little bit about how, not only sort of why word of mouth is important, but how you can harness it realistically in today's world?
Well, this is another area that's distinctly owned by human beings, right? We believe each other. We may not believe a company. We may not believe the media. We usually don't believe advertising, but we believe each other. So, really, the excuse me, really the marketing mindset today. How do we spread ideas? It's not beating your chest and telling everybody how great you are. It's doing something so interesting, so worthy, so memorable that people can't wait to talk about it themselves, right? So again, this is something AI can't really do for you. And most of our marketing, most of our book sales, let's say, it's happening without us. It's what people tell each other. It's reviews. It's testimonies. It's a book club. It's someone talking about your book at work. So how do we create something about our work that is so interesting and so worthy that people can't wait to talk about it? That's the real key to word of mouth marketing. And this idea about a lot of people kind of roll their eyes when you talk about influencers, but I mean, an influencer is simply anybody that spreads ideas. And that's most people are influential about something, but they don't identify them as influencers. But they love something. They're passionate about something. They love books. They love art. They love music or whatever. And so our job is to not hold the microphone, and tell everybody we're great, but to write a script and let someone else have the microphone, because that's what moves things in our world today.
Well, that's great. That's so helpful. Thank you for that. Well, maybe we can pivot a little bit and just talk about your writing process and your publishing process. As writing for life, people are really interested both in the craft of writing, but also in the um, concrete how to get published, whether to self-publish or, go for a traditional publisher. And so my question is just, you've published, I think, 11 books. This is your 11th book, I think.
Yes.
Are there any less surprises? Were there any surprises this time? I mean, it sounds like your fun cover was a new adventure. Um, or just generally, kind of, what are your lessons learned, or sort of advice you have for aspiring authors? I know you mentioned before we started recording that you self publish, I think, your book. So, just any kind of advice or insights you have about the writing or publishing process that you think might be useful for others. I know people are always keen to hear that from our guests.
Yeah, we could do a whole show about that topic. So I was very fortunate that my first three books were published by McGraw-Hill, and it was good. It was a good educational process to go through that process. And this would have been around 2011, 2012, and that was really the tail end of the glory days of the publishing industry. Um, once you start getting into 2014, 2015, it was like rats leaving a sinking ship. The whole industry was being disrupted. I think I had five different editors in 2 years, something like that. Um, they really moved away from a lot of different genres. They moved away. There was less risk. There was less tolerance of developing an author, developing a talent, marketing the book. That's almost not done at all anymore. And so, for me, self-publishing is definitely the way to go. But the mistake that most authors make is they they think that they'll sell a book because they've written a great book, and you almost never do. It's really, really hard to sell books. And the key is building your personal brand, building an audience. And that's how I sell books. And I actually make, a decent money off my books. And that almost never happens. But the reason I can do that is because I've worked for 15 years to build an audience. And you mentioned when you introduced me that you enjoy my blog, and I have a blog, I have a podcast. I show up, on social media, and I'm generous, and I help people and sort of build an audience and eventually a community out there. And so, I have hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. And if I said, hey, everybody, I wrote a new book, how many people will buy the book? Almost none, because it's ephemeral. There's not a strong emotional connection there. But if I tell people on my blog, now these are people who have subscribed to me, literally, they've opted in, they've subscribed to me. And if I write on my blog, hey, everybody, I have a new book. How many people will buy it? Almost everyone, because they've been waiting to hear that. And many of them will write me back saying, oh, I can't wait. How can I help you promote this book? So that is the long, patient process. There's no shortcut, but that's really how to sell books today. In terms of my writing process, um, I don't have a plan to write books. I only write a book when I see some problem in the world that I can't figure out. And I get obsessed, just obsessed, not in a healthy way, to try to figure it out. And then over a period of about a year, what I'll do is I'll write an outline of the book. Here are the 10 or 12 chapters that I think will be in the book. And of course, this is a nonfiction book. It's a business book. And I'll then create an electronic file for each of those chapters. I use Evernote. And then over a period of 9 months or a year, when I see things in the world that are relevant to the book. I'll put it in that file. So I'll see a quote. Oh, that would be great for chapter 3. I'll see a statistic. Oh, that's great for chapter 9. Here's an interview on a podcast. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. You fill up your chapters. Then when it's time to write, you open up your files and you don't have this intimidating blank screen. Now you have everything you need to weave the book together. And the last thing I'll say is I do a lot of coaching about writing books, and the number one reason by far why people never finish their book is because they stop and start and stop and start and stop and start. And that's okay if you're writing a blog post. But when you're writing a 50,000 word narrative, it gets disheartening because every time you stop and then you start and you have to reorient yourself and figure out where you were, what you've said, what stories you've already told, and you feel like you're starting over. So what I would say is block out time and write it in a sprint. If you're disciplined and you have everything ready to go, you can write a book, in a couple weeks. If you have an AI assist, I don't really use AI for writing my book, but I mean, if you have an AI assist, it could be even shorter. So that's the high level of my process.
Well, that's great. And can I ask you a follow-up question about your
Sure.
blog? Because just, you said you don't sort of start off with the end in mind in terms of like, oh, I know in 2 years I want to write a book, or in 5 years, or 1 year, whatever. And it emerges organically. What I notice about your blog, being a regular reader of your e-newsletter, it's because it's not just a blog where, of course, you have to go there and find it. It's, it ends up in my inbox. So I read it regularly. Is that you are so generous. You use that word, and I really agree. You're not just giving. It's not just like a self-promotional thing. You're giving meaningful content in all of your newsletters that clearly takes time and effort, and you're not just doing it to humble brag, or just get to the end goal of promoting yourself. You're putting a lot of work into it. It shines through. And my question is what motivates you to do that? Is it truly like, it sounds like in your mind you're like, this is my strategy to build a community. And I assume that it also impacts your consulting work and your speaking work. So it's probably multifaceted, right? It's not just to
Yeah.
build your brand as an author. So
Well,
my question is, do you
well,
love it? Do you like it inherently? Do you enjoy it? Or is it work that will sort of get to this end goal? Thanks.
yeah. Well, it's everything. I mean, it gets it. It's the blog and showing up with my content. I also have a podcast that it's in its 13th year, never missed an episode. So when I started out, it was I blogged when I could, when I felt like it, and it was sort of an experiment. And then after about 9 months, I realized that every business benefit was coming from that blog. Every new contact, every new collaborator, every new business friend, every new customer was coming through the blog. So I decided to double down and be more intentional and to kind of hit a schedule. But it was definitely part of building a business, building a personal brand, like we talked about a moment ago, building an audience that eventually would buy my stuff. Now, I think I'm in my like 15th year and or maybe 16th year. And it has become something more. Yes, and this is not unusual, by the way. So I wrote a book on personal branding. It's the best-selling book on personal branding called Known. And there's all kinds of case studies in there. And here, this is a common pattern. People start creating content and building an audience to create a business. But over time, once they become known, they have an opportunity to use that platform to do something better, to do good in the world. And today, Kate, I get a message from someone at least once a week, saying, "You changed my life." Now, I think a person would be lucky to hear that one time in their life, to hear someone say, "You changed my life for the better. Thank you." Now, that's better than money, right? I mean, why? That's an amazing honor, an amazing privilege that I have a platform that's lifting people up and and changing things in the world. I look at it that if I could help one person, if I just move something in one person in a positive direction, that sends a ripple through history. That sends a ripple that can change their families and change their lives. And that's it's like a sort of a hidden legacy. I'll never know how all these little ripples I'm creating are having a positive impact. But I am. And I think that's a good way to use my talents today. So and like I said, this is a pattern that a lot of people follow to. Once you use it to start to build a business, but now it's a privilege and it's an honor. And I'll also say it's a great intellectual challenge to stay current and to write something that's interesting and relevant and maybe even entertaining. I throw dad jokes in there every once in a while, right? And so it's like, okay, what am I going to do this week? And then you write something cool and you think, ooh, I can't wait till they see this one.
Well, that's awesome. And I mean, you're giving voice to the motivation that I think a lot of us struggle with to get over the hump of really making a commitment to building our personal platform or brand.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing your experience. Well, maybe just one more question, and then we can ask about sort of how we can find you online and all that good stuff. But I really enjoyed your. I think it's the book right before this, and I can see it on your shelf next to Audacious for those
Yeah.
who are watching.
Belonging to the brand.
Belonging to the brand, and the can you tell us the subtitle, because the subtitle is about community. um, and my question to you is, I really appreciated, I think, the key concept that I got from that was, community is the sort of last best place to do marketing, and that kind of relates to the word of mouth and the awe and the
Yeah.
collective effervescence that we talked about. But I just wanted to say, what linkages do you see between this concept of community building and being audacious and disruptive? Because as we know, being disruptive can often disrupt communities and sort of blow things up. And so where do you see the linkages, and where do you see maybe that this new book, Audacious, is taking you in sort of different directions conceptually and intellectually?
Well, I think it really is all linked. In fact, I think if you read my 11 books in order, it would show like the revealing of my thinking. And it kind of goes like this. So a community begins with trust. And no one's going to join a community unless they feel like they're going to have a good experience, and that usually comes from a person. Well, how do they know that person? Because that person has a personal brand. They've heard of that person. They love them. They trust them. I want to join that community. Now, how does that lead to awe? Because in a community, you have this connection, you have this collaboration, you have this collective effervescence of people just working together and building on ideas together. And then how does that lead to word of mouth? Because you're doing things I'm not telling everybody in the community, hey, everybody, go promote this idea. We'll you do things in my community, and people will be so excited they can't wait to tell people outside the community, and they'll put it on LinkedIn, and then people on LinkedIn will say, "Oh, Mark, I feel like I'm losing out. How can I join your community?" "Oh, great, come join my community. That's another person that's going to buy my book someday." So it truly does work together. And the subtitle of the book is "Why Community is the Last Great Marketing Strategy." And I think that's, I mean, it seems bold. Uh, you know, uh, it sounds like a clickbait headline, but It really is true because building a brand is all about that emotional connection. And especially young people today, they're hiding out in Twitch. They're hiding out in Discord. We can't see them. We can't connect with them. They don't know about our brand. They don't want to be bothered, but they love community. And maybe they'll be in our community, or maybe we can be in their community. We've got to figure out, the role of community in brand marketing because that's where the whole world is going. Let me give you one. I'm more of a storyteller than a statistics person, but here's one number that I think really illustrates this. So in 20, this is research from Edison Research. In 2023, 24% of young adults, I think the age was 12 to 32, were in Discord. 24%. That's a big number. Last year, it was 46%. 24% to 46% in 1 year. I've never seen any communication platform grow that fast. So, and when did my book come out? 2023, right? So community is the next big thing. Well, here we just see, Discord is more than doubled in a year at this, incredible rate, or almost doubled, let's say. So, so community, it is. It's the future. It's the future of marketing because that's where people want to be. It's the only marketing tactic that people really want.
Well, that's great. A few minutes ago, you used the word bold, and what immediately came to mind was audacious.
Right. That's exactly right. It all goes together.
And I love that about seeing sort of the evolution of your thinking, because of course that makes sense as your books come out. Well, Mark, as we've been talking about, you are just such an incredibly generous, and I'll add thoughtful and sort of cutting edge leader, really. So thank you so much for the work you're doing and the sort of joyful generosity in which you do it. It's really, really inspiring and beneficial to me and to our community at Writing for Life and beyond. So just to remind everybody, the full title of your most recent book, Audacious: The Rebel's Guide to Disruptive Marketing. So can you tell us, how can we connect with you? We've been talking about connection and community in your newsletter. How can we opt in to connect with you?
Oh, well, it's super easy. You don't have to remember my name, let alone how to spell it. You just have to remember businesses grow. If you can remember businesses grow, that's my website. And I called it Businesses Grow because I knew no one would ever remember how to spell Schaefer. And if you can find Businesses Grow, you can find, the blog we talked about today, my podcast, all my books. And we talked today about, Audacious and belonging to the brand. We mentioned Known, my personal branding book. You can find all of that on my website and also on Amazon.
Well, that's great. And again, for those listening, I think the main takeaway too for the writers who are listening is that being a writer today is being a business person, and that as you said earlier, if you really want to share your books with the world, sell your books, you have to think of it like a business. And so I think all of this is very relevant and immediately applicable to our group. Well, is there anything like just final words you want to say about awe or what you've learned from writing this book and what you hope people will take away? Maybe the one thing you hope people will take away.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for all the great questions today. It's been a lot of fun and it's been joyful for me to be here and I appreciate all the nice compliments. We cover a lot of ground and I think the thing that always sums it up for me is there's a subtitle of my Marketing Rebellion book, which is The Most Human Company Wins. And also, I think the most human author wins. Some of the words you used to talk about me is the generosity and the caring and the authenticity and that has helped you create a bond with me that will extend long past this show, right? And that's I think what we all need to do is look at every opportunity. I mean, every email, every text message, every phone call, every book, every blog post or podcast. How do we show our hearts? How do we show our passion, our compassion, our smiles show that we care, and just add our human story to everything that we do.
That's great. All right. Well, how do we show our hearts? That's a good ending. Well, thank you so much, Mark Schaefer. I wish we could talk for for another couple hours. You're just it's such a joy to be in your presence. But blessings on this new book, and we hope that we will get to talk to you again in the future and hear about future projects. And again, thank you so much for talking to us today about Audacious.
Thank you, Kate.
Take care. Thanks again.